And we're live. Welcome to the realm, property realm that is. And for the last time this year, I get the honour of speaking to you with the Realmers. Where are you, Realmers? Come on screen. How you going?
Hey,
Howdy.
how's it going?
So this is the last show of the year. It's Christmas time, and we need to pull up stumps because obviously those sort of things happen, and everyone goes about their business and buying presents to put under the Christmas tree, as Remo's got there. So, Co, mate, kick us off. What are we talking about today?
Uh, so we're heading into Christmas time. Everyone's in different states of immersion as we head into the Christmas or festive season. I'd love to discuss, and you mentioned this over the weekend about things getting a little bit messy over the Christmas period or heading into the new year. Can you tell us a little bit about what development and property investments, builders especially, what's happening during this Christmas period when it comes to builders, particularly in Queensland as well?
Yeah, all right. So, I mean, you're alluding to our weekend email that goes out, and I
Yes, that
mentioned
was a bit
that,
of a
yeah.
surprise
Well,
for
okay. So
some.
earlier in the year, I had a mate call me up and said he'd just been to a Queensland HIA meeting, so the Housing Industry Association meeting, and they estimated that over the next 24 months, one quarter of builders would go under. And so I went, oh, gee, that's a big number. That's pretty crazy. And so I didn't think much more of it. And then it sort of started to manifest itself as the supply chain tightens up and the timeframes expand, the costs increase for fixed price. When they've got fixed price contracts and their cost of goods increase and there's that margin keeps getting squeezed. And then last week we got notified that one of the big builders that we've dealt with in the past was in voluntary administration. And so I've sort of thought, oh, that might be the start of it, right? So this is the sort of stuff that's starting to happen. And you kind of scratch your head and say, well, how does that happen in a boom time? Like, how does a builder go bust when the builders are so busy? And I kind of touch a bit on that in the email. If you don't get those emails, hit us up in the comments or go into our website and subscribe because you need to be in touch with that sort of good information. And it is good information. I'm not biased about it, even though I write them. It's really good information. But the point is that this is the sort of stuff that's happened. But everyone kind of goes, oh, okay, well, if they kind of accept that fact, CO, then they say, oh, well, then it must be a good time for buying because, okay, if these builders go bust, then we'll get cheap houses. But the reverse actually happens, right? Because there's a contraction of supply of product in the market in terms of finished houses. There's a contraction of available builders because some builders have fallen by the wayside and subbies, and then they're getting burnt. And so people need to increase their margins as they go forward and do other bits and pieces to try and make up money that they've lost. So it actually, the reverse, for a time, the reverse is true. And we actually see build costs increase and those finished products increase. So we're not seeing a crash in the market yet. We see a tightening further of the market when it comes to builders, and that's something that we're probably going to see definitely moving into 2022 as we keep going.
Interesting, interesting. So you mentioned with building costs and material costs increasing over this period, but it seems like it's something that's been happening over the last year or two as well. I'm sure Remo, you could agree and expand more on material costs. I know a lot of clients ask about that, but Scott, what does this mean for property owners, investors, especially if they're thinking that they can get in cheap? What does this ultimately mean for them?
Yeah, well, you have to be careful. I mean, okay, so what happens is that creates more uncertainty in the new construction market. Now, unless you really know the background of your builder and the ones that we deal with, we have a pretty good idea about. But I mean, nothing is 100% certain. Then it puts more emphasis on established properties, right? If you're talking about residential, and that's why we're still seeing, and I'll flick to Karen for this, is for pricing that is something listed at 800 doesn't sell for 800 because it's now going for still it puts that more pressure on. It's going for 900 or 850 or 920 or whatever it might be because of these things that are happening in the new market. Oh, I don't know what my builder to go bust. I don't know when it's going to get built. Let's relate it to another set of terms. new cars, right? There's guys out there waiting 6, 12 months for a new car. So and caravans, right? Same thing, want to travel around Australia, do whatever. So they'll pay more for a second-hand one or an almost new one or whatever because they can have it now, right? And then they'll pay and wait for the new one. And so we're seeing the same thing in new construction. If you pay and wait, you'll get a better price, right? Because you're taking that risk, you're taking that time frame to do it. People are paying more to get established homes. Karen, on some of the stuff that we're seeing, I know that you've called on places and it's nowhere near the list price. What's some of the big ones you've seen?
Well, even going back 6 months ago, I know we had a client and she was looking in a very nice suburb in Brisbane, and things would be listed around the $900,000 mark. And they were selling for 1.1, 1.2, and they were listing them at that price. On the coast in certain suburbs, most things now don't even bother putting a price on it anymore because the price just ends up so far beyond what they are. But even things that I put in certain categories of maybe $800,000 to $900,000, they're going for well over $1 million. And for a lot of places, this is the land. They're going to knock down the old shack and build another new house on it. But in the meantime, at least they get to live in their shack. I do a lot of driving around and riding around the beach areas, and every couple of weeks, there's another house demolished. There's another new one going up. And, just the other day, it's what would be probably a multi-million-dollar estate. And 20-year-old house, which, is kind of bit of the bygone era now, completely gone. It's just dirt. They just completely demolished the whole house. And, I think they're living in the granny flat, but there's just so much going on, and they're paying these exorbitant prices for stuff, what we consider exorbitant, and then they knock the house down. So, let's hope they're going to live in it for 20 years because it'll take them that long to get their money back.
That's right. And Remo, before I jump over to you, because you got some stories about a sign that you put up on one of the sites that we're working on. You can tell us how many inquiries you had off the sign. We got some shout out here. We got Mickey Cohen saying yo. So yo, Mickey, right back at you. Thank you for stopping by. We got Shane Egmalese. What's up, lunchtime chat crew? Yes, it is lunchtime, Shane. Or well, maybe for you. I haven't eaten yet, but maybe the other guys in New South Wales have. And Shane also says you got a really nice Christmas tree, Remo.
Thanks, Shane.
Well, Karen's got the hat, and Xiao and I, we're just not into it. I know there's a bit of green. Where are we there? But that's always there. So I probably should have put a, tinsel or something up, shouldn't I? Anyway, Shane, thanks for stopping by. All right, so Remo, just before we get into some of the technicalities on how to survive the Christmas with contracts and other bits and pieces, so we can fully answer Xiao's question, of course. But you put a sign up on one of our industrial sites, which is like unmowed vacant land, right? Do you want to tell us what's happened in the past week on that?
Yeah, so obviously with the vacant land that we've got in Lisarow, we put a sign up just to engage and get a bit of drive-by interest. We don't have the sign up we don't have any marketing online. It's purely just a sign. We've already had 3 inquiries from drive-bys this week. And I suspect we're going to have a whole lot more. What we typically see during rainy seasons, as we have right now, it's not raining right now, but it's been pouring for the last 3 days, and it's going to continue to pour for the next, I think, 9 or 10 days between sort of Nelson Bay, Newcastle, and Sydney. So what we typically see is as soon as it starts pouring, everybody gets out in their cars, they start doing drive-bys and start looking at what's available in the marketplace. So we've already had 3 inquiries. It's not been the worst week, but we expect some worse weather to come. So I guess that's all I have to say. We just inquiries are flowing in, and it's looking good.
That's right, and we're not talking about like a majorly high. It's on a busy-ish road, but it's not a majorly, thoroughfare for a road, and we're still getting that level of inquiry.
Yeah, it's not on a busy road. Railway Road, which is sort of down the south end of the property, is actually quite quiet. It's the road that's opposite Railway Road on the other end that's quite busy. But you can't see our sign from that road. You've got to literally drive past Railway Road to actually see the sign. So, Interesting.
All right. So first thing to note, CO, for the Christmas break is that both Karen and Remo alluded to is that people are out and about doing stuff and they're looking at signs and they're going to be ringing up, they're going to be making offers and they're going to be doing bits and pieces because they've got that time on their hands. Now, there's usually a cut-off as we go into Christmas, which is probably around now with the 23rd of November, 2021. So it'll just about a month-ish out from Christmas. So anything after now, contracts now, they're really not going to settle before Christmas, and they might try and push them for another week and try and get them through. But in reality, it's not going to happen. And so as soon as we come into November, when we're buying property, we change our contracts and we very much look at what I call them Santa clauses, right? So they're clauses that deal with Christmas, and we pretty much bump anything from December straight through to February, because when we get to December, we don't get any action from solicitors after, say, the 17th or whatever the Friday before Christmas is this year. And we get not much action from banks. Banks are a problem. Even though they say they're staffed, they're not fully staffed, but they're staffed and dealing with stuff. Well, they're already taking up to 6 weeks to pick up a file. So who knows how long they're actually going to take over Christmas time. And of course, we've got our building and pest inspectors. We've got the other side solicitors, not just our side we're dealing with. We've got the other side's bank of releasing mortgages if we're buying. Real estate agents are generally around, but they're not necessarily around that Christmas New Year break. So it just becomes a huge mess, right? And trying to do deals at this point in time becomes a problem. So you're better off extending the date and making sure that you can make good on your contract. There was an article kicking around this week to highlight the fact that there was a young couple in Brisbane, I think it was. Karen, I think you read it a couple of times. That
Yes.
They're buying their first home, was it? And
Yes.
Yeah, that was pretty bad.
Yeah, so for all those watching, they're buying their first home. They put down, was it 75,000 Karen deposit? Yep. And they had approval from the bank and what have you, but the bank couldn't settle on settlement day. It was Westpac, big bank, and the seller wouldn't extend the contract. Okay, they said, oh no, that's fine. And under Queensland rules, the seller has the choice of, and of course chose to, keep the deposit. Okay, so they've got their first home owner, they've saved 75,000 plus other bits, they've put that down, and they've lost their deposit. It's gone because the bank couldn't settle. The bank rung them the next day and said, oh, we're about to settle now, the next day. Well, it's too late. It doesn't matter. 5 p.m. close of business. It's too late. So anyway, their silver lining was the bank realised their mistake and whatever, and who knows how, but they got their money back from the bank. But the seller sold the property for about 80 grand more, I think it was, Karen, or something.
It was
from
a bit more
memory.
money, and they kept the 70,000.
That's right. So they're up about 150 odd thousand on the transaction because they kept that first person's deposit and they sold it for more money. Now, they would have had a backup contract, right? So if these guys didn't settle, they've already got it listed at, say it was 920, they sold it for $1 million to the next person for an extra 80 grand. They've made their money and they've kept the first person's deposit. That's because the market's on a rise. That's the risk you have as a buyer. Now, those people didn't do anything wrong. They would have done their finance right, they've done their building inspection right, they've got a decent deposit in the deal, probably wasn't 10%, but I was close to 10%, I think. And so that's all at risk because the bank couldn't get a paperwork done. They got it done the next day and they lost their deposit. Now, as I said, the bank made good on that, so good on them, but they don't have to make good on that. I mean, they could kick up a stink about it, but there could be other banks that just would go, oh, you're a number in the system, whatever, forget it. So that is the risk there. So if you've got to be really careful, if you can't get on to your banks, you can't get things sorted that need to be sorted, you miss any of those key dates, that's a risk that you run in there. So you have those Santa clauses in there, in those contracts that you do, and you get your solicitor to help you write them, and that just keeps you safe and has those clauses in there for this period of time because it's pretty wild. It's pretty wild.
So I will just add to that. So if anybody watching is in a position where they are coming into Christmas and they are looking to settle on contracts, of call your solicitor now and start looking at getting extensions done now. It's too late. Like this developer or whoever they bought, the vendor, whoever sold that house, they had full right to take that 75,000. It's not the best decision, or not, so to speak, the right decision to make, but they certainly had full right, according to the law, to do that. So
well, I mean, Shane reckons that banks suck. I mean, look, I'm not going to disagree with that. I mean, banks are impersonal, aren't they, Shane? I mean, it's not a personal entity. It's a corporation with processes and whatever, and you become very impersonal in your dealing with the bank. It's as simple as that. You become a number on the system. You feed their. Anyway, we're not going to get. That's a whole other show about all that sort of stuff. And Shane's asking, what would you do, Scotty? Would you give back the 75K? Oh, okay. Oh, why don't you just put us on the spot there, Shane? What would you do? Give back the 75K? Well, as Remo just said, they had the right to keep the 75,000, even though it wasn't perhaps the best moral decision. They had the right. They had the right under the contract to keep it. Would I keep? I wouldn't keep a first homeowner's deposit in my dealings. That's just not what we do. And because it would go like this, right? I'd say to my wife, "Oh, Lou, they defaulted. I mean, we can keep their deposit." And she goes, "Oh, we'll just send it back." And I'll go, "But we could keep their deposit." And she'll go, "Just send it back." And I go, "Yeah, okay, we'll send it back." All right. And that's exactly how they come. Hey?
Would you keep Shane's deposit though?
Would I what?
Keep Shane's deposit.
Shane's deposit's a different one. I would possibly keep Shane's deposit. Yes, I do know Shane, and then that could be something that we could look at doing. So, yeah, that's right. Oh, well, I got his approval except that last bit. Okay, so thanks, Shane. Good answer. But look, that's the thing, right? But this is where it comes down to, and like, this is something to be mindful of at any time, not just Christmas time, right? Is that when we're dealing with sellers. And I mean, Karen deals a lot with the agents, right? And so we end up sort of tag teaming, and you end up with almost a good cop, bad cop situation if we're trying to buy development sites, eh? And so Karen's located a site with an agent, and she's dealing with the agent. And then I always put in our clauses for development sites that we want to have a direct communication with the seller, right? So then I deal with the seller and say, "Oh, it's great, you're going to have a glass of wine when you sell," and you sort of do that. So Karen's knocking at the agent and going through like the formal means of the agent solicitor, and so I'm trying to smooth over the seller, because with an agent in place, you have a disconnection of relationship between the seller and the buyer, okay? And those things, that can be fine if we're just talking about contracts that need to be sorted. But if you're trying to sort out a problem, and you can say to the seller, "Look, my bank can settle tomorrow, right? Can I sip you a couple of cartons of beer or whatever, and you smooth them?" You know what I mean? That's worth 75K. You know what I mean? And so people have lost that in a lot of that negotiation in dealings now, and it's very something that we specifically try and do. We don't always get to do it because some sellers
you've got to do it through a lawyer.
And that's right. And when you get lawyers involved, there's like a third channel. So there's solicitors to solicitors. There's sort of one of our team to the agent and one of our team to the seller directly. And that's what we try and have, that 3 points of contact. And it's not always easy, but if for you as a buyer, you've got to keep that in mind, And to be honest, in the current state, I've heard of people writing, "Oh, our family loves your house and we could see growing up kids there," and all this sort of stuff. And I'm not convinced that works on many people, because people just go, I need the highest price I can get when I sell because I want to buy this other house up the road or in another city or whatever. So that's it, but you've got to be mindful of it, okay? And especially at this time when you have all these public holidays and dates and what have you. I mean, look, here's the story, right? I got a text yesterday because a guy comes to service the pool at home, and I got a text. So what are we? This is the 22nd of November. He says, "Oh, you're booked for your next fortnightly pool visit to do a check or whatever, right? Next week, and that'll be the last one till January because of the short weeks in December." And I'm like, "Hang on, tick. You're a pool company. Summer's 3 months. You've skipped December, so 1/3 of summer you're not servicing. But there's already people out there going, 'Oh, December's too hard. That's it. I'm out of here. Let's go.'" Right? Because this is how it works. And so this is what happens at this time. You've got to be super mindful of that. And those clauses and the contracts are very, very important. All right, yeah. So what else we got, Co?
Thanks, Scotty. So you've touched on a few things there in regards to the mess that some property owners and investors can expect leading into the Christmas period with builders builders going down or going under collapse, increasing of materials, and homeowners potentially missing out on contracts. But I love the advice you've given in terms of adding on the Santa clauses to bump contracts into the new year, into February. With all the mess that's going on at the moment, there are obviously a lot of buyers still in the market. Who's celebrating Christmas on a win in regards to the property industry, and who's maybe cutting it a bit short when it comes to property, or maybe even a loss during this good Christmas period? Can you touch a little bit on that?
Yeah, well, I mean, winners. I mean, everyone thinks everyone else is winning in property, right? I mean, the property's going up. I mean, the real winners are the people sitting at home doing nothing, in the house that they own. That's the real winners. The landlords and the homeowners are the winners because their properties are increasing in value and they're capturing the economic rent increase in the value of the property. There's the guys that might be doing, say, better than average if they're doing it well. That could be trading up in property or changing properties or building and selling and making some margin, which is totally possible at this stage in time. But the losers are people that are either waiting for the next time to sort of get into the market, and we see lots of them. I mean, and one or two shows ago, Karen told us a story about her friends that were still waiting to buy, waiting for the next downturn, waiting for this. So the best time to buy is when you're ready and able, not necessarily trying to time the market if you're not a pro. So that's a potential loser. Builders, I know, are pretty stressed out. So just to reiterate how that build contract works, if there's a delay on land, like there is being right now, and there's a delay on materials, then by the time we sign a build contract, say in July this year, the new financial year, they still might not have started that build. And if it really pushes out, the land gets delayed, gets titled in March, they don't start till April. Well, the next range of price rises are in March and April, definitely, for the build industry, if they're not already happened incrementally along the way. The big ones happen in March and April. And all of a sudden, they got a fixed price build contract. Depending on the wording on it, some of them have 180 days with an escalation clause, some don't. It's called rise and fall. But essentially, there's a big variance there in price increases. And that can, put a builder out. So what they're doing is that they're now going to build. They're not making enough money on that slab drawdown, so they're trying to wait for the next drawdown to pay for the extra slab and costs and Rio, and just they're always taking from the money that they're about to earn to pay for stuff that they're trying to pay for now, and it's a big mess. And a real example is on one of our projects in New South Wales, not the Lisarow one, another one. And from the time that we quoted on that, say in late last year, early this year probably, to now, there's been a $234,000 price increase in that construction, just in the construction, right? And it's industrial shed, so it's going to come in one of three ways. It's going to be glass, it's going to be metal, it's going to be concrete. That's it. The rest is pretty much the same, right? Coincidentally, that project has also had a 500 to 700,000. It just works out 1,000 because it's 1,000 square meter building. Increase in sale price. So the price per square meter went up about $230, but the sale price per square meter has gone up between $500 and $700 per square meter. So we've kind of doubled our extra spend, right, on that project because of the way the markets work. But you can see how you get caught. If we'd sold those properties off the plan and we were waiting to see what was happening in the market, because that's what we do, if we'd sold all those properties off the plan at the old price and our build price has now gone up, we're able to build now, we're starting, almost immediately, then we're $234,000 less short in that project. And then all of a sudden you could go, well, I could resell all them now. So you'd have to try and get out of those contracts and do that. And that's another thing to look at this time, is that if you are buying off the plan, there is outs generally for the seller, developer or builder, whoever it might be. And right now, you'd have to look at the best way out. If that was our situation, then we'd have to have a meeting, and we'd have to have a meeting with our partners and say, can we get out of these contracts because we can sell each one now for an extra $500 or $600 a square meter and actually make more money, not lose money? Then that'd have to be a viable conversation. And I guarantee you those conversations are happening all around the country in all these new developments every week. And you're at risk if you're buying those projects, because if they can get out of them and sell them for more, they will. Now, that's a little bit different to holding someone's deposit, because we've got to report back to partners and other bits and pieces to make profitability on their money. And that's the way the contracts are structured. And we wouldn't hold the deposit, you give it back, right? But the point is that you can miss out on property even if you've got a contract, and that's something to look out for.
Awesome, Scotty. So a lot of gems there for the viewers today. And guys, so for those of you who are watching, do drop down your comments and questions so that we'll be sure to answer them down the track. But just to recap from what you've shared, Scotty, a few things that property owners and investors can look at or look out for over the Christmas period. It seems like if you're in property and you've got contracts secured, for some who might be at risk leading into this period of time, but some who have the Santa clauses put in place, you'll be able to reap the benefits in the months to come. And then obviously you touched on the builders who are a little bit under stress. Guys, what are some of the things that we can leave viewers with in terms of advice, and we mentioned a lot of what to look out for. What are some of the things that or benefits that they can take a hold of over the Christmas period if they're still looking to get into the property? As you mentioned, it's probably not a good idea to wait. So what's other things that we want to advise or give them tips on in order to make the most opportunities over the break and over the next couple of months?
Yeah, well, Karen, you can have a go at that one. I've talked enough.
I've got some wonderful tips for people. When you're on the Gold Coast having a holiday, do not walk in to an off-plan apartment block and go buy yourself an apartment, because it's just so perfect on the Gold Coast. And this is what you do when you go on holidays. You buy a holiday apartment, something that you'll probably regret for the next 20 years. So don't do that, and don't do it when you come to the Sunshine Coast or anything else. Don't buy any holiday apartment anywhere where you're having a holiday. Just don't do it. That's probably good. My number one tip for Christmas. And other than that, it's just, as Scott said, the only agents working will be in the tourist places, trying to catch hold of tourists making that last minute decision to buy something. There's no lawyers working. There's no one in the banks working. Titles office, you missed that one, Scott. There's no one in state revenue working over the Christmas period to stamp your titles document to actually issue you your title. And, of course, if you need a bank, they're not going to work as well. So whatever you do over this period, just automatically add 2 or 3 weeks. Agents, of course, and sellers will push till the cows come home to make it quicker. Don't do it, because you could possibly lose your deposit because you won't make dates. No one, even a cash sale. Nothing is going to work over Christmas if no one's there to stamp your titles.
Yep, no, that's true. It's a mess. Remo?
Yeah, I'm probably going to cop a lot of slack for this one. But my advice to anyone listening is take your wife to the inspection and leave her at home for the auction.
Okay. Right. Thankfully, we're not live, and I can just edit that out. Totally. Yeah, that's great. That's good. Okay. Okay. Well, we're not going to go into who's married, who's not here, Remo, and other bits and pieces on. That's fine. So that's okay. I think what you're saying is, if there is a more emotional member in your family, then they can be part of the decision-making process. But when the emotion's high, like an auction, perhaps, go by yourself or engage a buyer's agent Karen or Scott, something like that, right? That's what you're getting at, I'm assuming.
100%. Only because we
Yeah.
end up paying more when emotions are involved. We end up paying more from more than what the property is actually worth. So
That's why we attend auctions for you, so that
That's
you
exactly right.
that's
don't get
right.
carried away by emotions.
And that's a good point.
That's
That's a good. I mean, there's when emotions are high, intelligence is low, is the way the saying goes. So, yes, that's
right.
it. So that's a good one. Watch out for auctions. And because Karen said earlier, they're not putting prices on them, so they are doing a lot of this. Oh, we don't know. Let's do an auction, or let's do a tender, or let's do a online reverse Dutch auction, whatever. There's all this sort of stuff that goes on because agents, there's other reasons for that. I'm not bagging agents, especially my mates. If they're not my mates, I can bag them, but that's okay. But but there is some real reasons for that. They are limited with what they can say. They can get in trouble if they said it was going to go for 800 and it goes for 1.3. There is some problems on that. So if they that's why you're seeing a lot of non-pricing, because there's a bit of butt covering and there's a bit of we don't know what it's going to go for. So that's something to look out for as well. All right, well, I think so this is the last realm. So we're going to be back next year sometime, CO, I believe.
Yes. When are we back, Scotty?
Oh, I don't know. Well, I mean, I guess we all got to come back to work, right? I mean, we all know that nothing happens in December and January. So
Wasn't
I think
March?
we'll be back.
Didn't I hear March? Back at work at March?
March.
Maybe after
Karen's
my
going back in
birthday. That'll
March.
be April.
Right,
Scotty's
there you
just
go.
saying nothing happens between December and January because he's going on leave in 10 days or 20 days, and then
that's
comes
right.
back in February.
Yeah.
That's fine.
And that's right. And look, you make a good point, Remo, is that obviously nothing happens if I'm not here. So, I mean, thank you for reiterating the point I just made.
What's that emoji?
So, yeah,
Put that on the screen right now.
No, there's no emoji. But what I will have to say, I'll have to have a shout out to Shane, because obviously I've offended him because he said that he had 100K set aside for one of our projects and now he's got to look elsewhere. I think that's because I said I was going to keep his deposit, Remo. I don't know. It was that.
Well, you know what? Thankfully, I'm the one that looks after our joint venture partners. So, Shane, you've got nothing to worry about.
Okay, well, on that note, if you've got questions, hit them up in Property Realm and CO, where do they find us?
You can find us at propertyadvice.com.au or in our Facebook group. That's Property Realm Australia. So you can check us out on Facebook.
There you go. All right, so Facebook is obviously the place to be. Well, look, I've been good. I mean, we started this as a bit of a trial, right? And it seems to be going pretty well, I reckon. I mean, I don't know what show we're up to. Is it like 10th or something for Property Realm? So I'm pretty happy with how they're going. I'm excited to come back next year and we'll have a whole bunch of new content. And the feedback we're getting is that this format works, right? Because it's not just one, hopefully it's not one person's. I think I talk too much, but I prefer if you guys talk more next year. How about that?
You don't allow us to get a word in sideways. Maybe when you allow us to talk, we'll have something to say.
Okay. All right. I think we come back to that whole thing that, nothing happens if I'm not here again. So there we go. All right. Look, thanks, Realmers, and thanks for coming with us. And thanks for everyone watching, right? So that's it. We're off for the year.
Merry Christmas, everybody.
Merry Christmas.
Merry
That's
Christmas.
it. Karen's
Merry
very
Christmas.
seasonal there. All right. So find us on Facebook, as CO said, and of course, hit us up in the comments wherever you see this, even if it's pre-recorded, because our team will be able to get back to you. All right. That's it for Property Realm this year. Until next year, have a great Christmas.